Hey, I'm Asia. I want to go over culture real quick because I was just peeping out this Mayan calendar, just tripping off of this is, a representation of Mayan culture, right? And how this is also, we just went over a compass and a clock and a navigational calendar, right? Northeast, west, south, news, also direction and locations of energies and beings and forms. But this has everything to do with culture because this is how the Mayans, this is how traditions and story form were passed down in their culture. And so, culture is very important when it comes to us and individually and as a collective because we are very much a part, each one of us is a part of culture. And the best way to identify that is because we all have our individual life and we are in some way um, a recipient of whatever culture, societal, family, whatever ethnic culture, or we are a part of passing down. We do this simultaneously. We give and receive. So, just based off of our conditioning, which is another word to use to identify culture, is conditioning, right? It is providing the conditions, environment. So, our environments are very important to understand because it's not only a physical thing, but environments represent things that are happening spiritually. And when people are in certain poor physical, environmental neighborhoods and locations, that is happening physically in our third dimension is also happening spiritually, and it definitely has spiritual implications, and we see that every day by the type of fruit that a location produces. So but this has everything to do with culture and our sense of culture and our not being able to sense culture and know what culture is from its root standpoint, being able to connect to the tree of life, rather connecting to the tree of life or the tree of death. It's just a natural principle of life in duality. So culture is very much a part of the tree of life or tree of death, because depending on how we are cultured depends on how what we are connected to. And it's a way also of sight and seeing spiritually. So, culture, we need to get as people, as beings, not even people, that's not even a right word for us. We got to get out of being labeled and being classified because nobody's in the position to be able to do that. And you don't have the permission to do that to me willingly. I'm not a classification. Like it's very well known who people are out here, and you are in a better position the more that you know. So know your motherfucking self, especially if you have the ability to see, because it's definitely necessary in these times. So culture, we know culturing produces a certain type of outcome. So we have to look at our lives and look at things that are happening around us in our environment. That's a spiritual environment as well. A spiritual way of seeing an environment is through the relationships and the way that people think and seeing things from forms that are not right in front of our face. Being able to go through memories is a spiritual aspect of seeing. So um, we can get a good look at culture and what type of fruit is producing and what our culture is attached to. Is it our culture attached to the tree of life or tree of death? And if we can even call this culture, or if culture is even a positive thing, because to be cultured is to produce a certain type of outcome. Now, that outcome could be positive or negative, and we can look around and see the many aspects of negativity and bad fruit that these so-called cultures are producing. And a lot of it has to do with being off of the natural foundational principles of life and spirit by not being disconnected from the inter. By being disconnected from the relationship and spirit in our everyday lives and knowing how to identify it. Um, that's passed down through culture and traditions. Like you can't give somebody a what spirit is, a wholeness of what spirit is. First of all, it's in the unseen. It's happening all around us. There's no way to give somebody all of that information. But through story form, we are able to pass things down and give, leave symbols, use symbols and whatever universal tools that we have a connection to in order to pass down information through time. It's because it's a connection to the source of information, nature, because everything is built off of the foundation of nature. Because that's how we're able to exist, is through nature, because we are that. Nature is spirit. It is not separate. We only separate nature from us when we take on that spiritual perspective or perception or eye or point of view. Many ways to describe what that is. So we have to look at what is culture. We can see culture through the root form, and that's understanding in its most simplest form, simplest shape. Okay, its simplest shape, its root is to produce an outcome, produce. That's why farming is produce, a form of produce, and we use produce to multiply. So that's that sixth energy, creation. We do that on many different fronts, many different dimensions, many ways to explain that same old shit. You don't need a whole book. Just observe life and you get to see how sex plays out in creation and creativity. Um, so, and yeah, relationship. um, so culture is very important because it's also a sense of direction, right? Because the lack of culture in nutrition, culture, depending on how you're trying to culture something, what type of produce, what you're trying to produce, you're going to do the things necessary to create the environment in which something can grow. So we are very much a part of produce and growth. That's a spiritual aspect because that's what we do. We nurture and we're supposed to nurture and grow our children. Like that's part of culturing, and that's how traditions were passed down, especially through the family. But we have been disconnected from culture because of these institutions that we willingly participate in, and being disconnected from who we are as a people and our bloodline lineage and our star ancestry, because the spirit is not limited to the flesh, and the spirit comes before the flesh. So there has to be more than just this physicality and more than a physical lineage. It's also help you to get to know your not only physical lineage but also your spiritual lineage. It's just everything. I can find everything on that star map by bringing it to a singularity. Um, Real shit. Just a matter of perception and senses. That's your psychic ability to be able to sense and see things that are not apparent to the physical eye. And all it could go all the way to the physical eye depending on the power of the spirit. We are in 2022 now, supposedly. We are evolving as beings, and there are a lot of outdated ways of seeing, outdated forms, outdated hard drives. This is what happens when the phones get outdated, because it has a limited way of seeing. It's not able to handle the new, the birth, the creation, the new processes. We are very much processes. We have our own processes. We process. That's what intuition is. Going within is processing, analyzing. We can look at ourselves as computers. It's just a matter of taking on a perspective. Some people would look at the universe as just numbers, but I think that's also limiting, because that's numbers is just one way to identify and connect to the spirit. Some people connect to the church and religious beliefs. Okay, well, that's just your process, your way of identifying the spirit. It's not everything and entirely. We've got to come to that conclusion. So that's just people who have adopted that way of seeing. But we're in 2022 and there's many different ways of seeing. And we got to get some commonality in this, because we ain't doing this whole corporate religious system. That's about with. So, but anyways, and nature will show that. So, I was talking about culture. So we need to see our part in culture, and this is the most important thing, because this is how we participate in it, because we're participants whether we recognize it or not. If you, especially if you have children, you're passing down your culture, your way of nurturing to whoever's around you. We have to see ourselves as responsible in all these things. So when we can see how we're culturing, we can decide if that's something that's working for us or not. And us just being able to identify the spirit of it, the spirit of culture, and our placement within it and our connection to it, right? Because we're also connected to the universal spirit of culture. We are also participants within it. And whether that's light or dark, or the tree of life or tree of death, is up to us based on our choices. And this is a spiritual aspect of seeing things, seeing our reality. Okay. Because there's many different realities, there's many different beings and consciousness on this planet. So there's many different ways to seeing, but we all have the ability to see the micro and the macro. So culturing is very important to understand, because when you understand who's responsible for culturing you, when you want to know why, you get to learn about yourself and learn about your spirit and learn about your being and learn about life. You get to see how culture is used, and it's many different ways of culturing can be destructive, just by identifying something as culture as if it's just positive. Because if we consider rap music our sense of culture, our sense of nourishment, um, just for example, rap music, because they like to tie that to culture, but is that a positive thing for building beings, building individuals, building spirits, building communities? It's not about right or wrong. It's about how we use these things and our participation within them, within this. It's just about using our God-given intelligence and knowing if we want to heal or not, because we have to know that that's our responsibility, our responsibility to culture. And not culture the word, not nobody's culture or coven or nothing like that. I'm talking about our individual responsibility to our lives, because we are a part of some type of culturing, especially when we are living amongst many different environments. So it's about taking a deeper perspective of culture as in its spiritual sense, and its in its way of being formed. Because once we know the shape, the lightest form, the lightest shape of culture, which is to produce an outcome, to nurture, because culture, nature, nurture, those have an emphasis of health and positivity as far as continuing on in life, more of a life and rather than death. And so culture can also be used to destroy if it's not in its highest ways of existing. So that's how culture is able to be accepted as a positive thing, when it's actually can be destructive, just by calling something culture and expecting it to be positive, but not seeing how culture is used, can be used negatively and produce a sour, bad, poor outcome. Mathematics, navigating the spirit of culture and understanding what that has to do with us. Good night or good day, grand rising, grand evening.